Hi, I'm Jess, and 1 year ago I was hired as the campaign manager for Northampton North. It's been a busy year, but we're making real progress. My focus has been on growing our membership and recruiting new activists. We have a fantastic team out knocking on doors and hearing from residents all year round. Because of this, we have a team ready to win at the next election.
My name is Akram Mwanga. My role is Borough Campaign Manager for Barking and Newham. My role involves bridging the communication gap between the association officers and the volunteers, and also the voters, and also CCHQ. I'm the go-to man.
My name's Reece Fox and I'm the Borough Campaign Manager for Enfield and Haringey. When I started in Enfield and Haringey in 2017, my main aim was to build capacity. My team were going out once a week with maybe 1 or 2 people. Now, in 2019, they're going out 3 times a week with triple that figure. And that capacity building programme is really paying off.
It's been hard work, but now that the association has me as a full-time campaign manager, we can work together to get more members and more activists. And it's working. We've managed to grow our membership by more than 1/3 in just 12 months. It's partly because of the approach we take. I'm a big believer in making campaigning fun.
My priorities for the future are training and more training, getting more volunteers, and we need to get the support base for the party to carry out a massive campaign. We need to get more volunteers and capable to go onto the doorstep and engage with voters on a day-to-day basis.
It is thanks to your support that we can continue to build capacity.
Across the country, campaign managers like me are doing great work, winning elections, raising money and bringing in new members.
Labour are ready. In the last 7 months, they have recruited 102 members of staff. So with your support, we can continue to build capacity and take the fight to Labour.
Hi, I'm Jess, and 1 year ago I was hired as the campaign manager for Northampton North. It's been a busy year, but we're making real progress. My focus has been on growing our membership and recruiting new activists. We have a fantastic team out knocking on doors and hearing from residents all year round. Because of this, we have a team ready to win at the next election.
My name is Akram Mwanga. My role is Borough Campaign Manager for Barking and Newham. My role involves bridging the communication gap between the association officers and the volunteers, and also the voters, and also CCHQ. I'm the go-to man.
My name's Reece Fox and I'm the Borough Campaign Manager for Enfield and Haringey. When I started in Enfield and Haringey in 2017, my main aim was to build capacity. My team were going out once a week with maybe 1 or 2 people. Now, in 2019, they're going out 3 times a week with triple that figure. And that capacity building programme is really paying off.
It's been hard work, but now that the association has me as a full-time campaign manager, we can work together to get more members and more activists. And it's working. We've managed to grow our membership by more than 1/3 in just 12 months. It's partly because of the approach we take. I'm a big believer in making campaigning fun.
My priorities for the future are training and more training, getting more volunteers, and we need to get the support base for the party to carry out a massive campaign. We need to get more volunteers and capable to go onto the doorstep and engage with voters on a day-to-day basis.
It is thanks to your support that we can continue to build capacity.
Across the country, campaign managers like me are doing great work, winning elections, raising money and bringing in new members.
Labour are ready. In the last 7 months, they have recruited 102 members of staff. So with your support, we can continue to build capacity and take the fight to Labour.
Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Ian Dale. I'm your compere for the night. Welcome to the 13th live semi-final of Tories Have Got Talent. In fact, they've got so much talent tonight that not only will Jeremy Hunt and Boris Johnson be addressing you, at the same time, by the miracles of television, they are on BBC One talking to Andrew Neil. I wonder who they'd rather be talking to. Now, let me tell you what the format tonight is going to be. Each candidate will have 7 minutes to make a short speech to you. Welcome in the cheap seats, by the way, up there. I promise I will get some questions from you as well later. So 7-minute speeches. Jeremy Hunt is going to go first. Then I'll do a short interview with him. Then it's down to you to ask questions. I have got some pre-submitted questions, but I do want to take a lot of spontaneous questions from you. Now, the secret in these spontaneous questions is to be just that. Don't think, oh, I've got to ask a question on Brexit, because in a way they'll probably all Brexited out, and there's lots of things that they want to do after Brexit is complete, should it ever be complete, of course. So think about other issues that you'd quite like to hear their views on, which you think, well, maybe in the hustings in other areas of the country, they haven't had to answer the questions. The original questions are the best. They don't even have to be directly on a particular policy. It could be something a bit more philosophical. And it's the questions that they've never answered before. The answers to those questions, you'll probably learn a lot more about the candidates than the generic ones, if you see what I mean. So that's how the evening is going to work out. We have a couple of short warm-up acts for you. Kylie Minogue was not available this evening. So we have booked an ideal replacement. His name is Andrew Sharp. He is chairman of the Conservative National Convention. Please welcome Andrew.
Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday.
Dear, no microphone perhaps. Hello, hello? Very good. I couldn't hear the joke, so I don't know whether you're being rude or not. So, look, it is an honour and a privilege to welcome you here to this, the 13th of the 16 hustings, as Ian said. And it's great to see so many people here, including overflow, as it were. This whole process has been incredibly good for our party, as I'm sure you'd agree. You'll have already seen plenty of positive commentary about previous hustings from around the country. The first, no less, were described, the questions were described as spot on from Birmingham. And I think that's been a really good experience for the whole party. The candidates have expounded an attractive vision of a post-Brexit Britain that is global in outlook, is pro-business, is pro-free enterprise, is tolerant and optimistic. And I think that this exercise is therefore helping to dispel some of the traditional media narrative about us and our party. But of course, ladies and gentlemen, you have to be aware of fake news. There was an attempted hatchet job on Channel 4 earlier this week, and recently the New York Times described us all as a fanatical sect. Now, in this, the centenary year of the Conservative Women's Organisation, they should perhaps instead be celebrating that, or some of our other progressive achievements, starting with animal sentience as long ago as 1824. And don't forget, of course, ladies and gentlemen, Mrs. Pankhurst herself was a Tory. Now, the party that I and my national convention officers know, and Pamela Hall is here tonight, the one that we see every week as we travel around the country, is made up of engaged and engaging men and women of every colour, faith, age and sexual preference. United by their belief in our country, our institutions, an unshakable tradition of public service, and also an admirable commitment to campaigning in all weathers. And I've never met anybody in our party who cares where you come from, only where you're going. We mustn't forget there's more that unites us than divides us. And in the words of Lord Hailsham, conservatism is not so much a philosophy as an attitude, a constant force performing a timeless function in the development of a free society. So we're here to undertake a solemn duty as part of that commitment to a free society, because we're not just electing a party leader, but a Prime Minister. Now, the country we love would expect us to make sure that this process is rigorous, and of course Ian is here to help you do that too. We need a Prime Minister who will deliver Brexit and, of course, beat our political opponents. And we made the case at the party board that the leadership campaign had to have a hustings in every part of our United Kingdom, and that all members should have access to at least one. There was no disagreement, and at this point I'd like to thank very much the chairman of our party, the Right Honourable Brandon Lewis, for his work and support with that. and also more generally for his support for the voluntary party over the last couple of years. It's been very, very warmly received. I'd also like to thank the ops and conference teams at CCHQ. Running all of these has been a mammoth undertaking, as you can imagine. So Tom Skinner and David Comerford in particular deserve a big thank you from us. And finally, although he's not here this evening, I'd very much like to thank your regional chairman, Peter Booth, also a very big supporter of you in particular. He works tirelessly on your behalf, as I'm sure you're aware, and he's held in very high regard. Now, before I hand over, can I ask one further question on the subject of resources? As you will have seen, there was a note on your chair about campaign managers and the campaign managers programme. Can you please read that and take an interest in it? Some people are shaking their heads. This happened to me yesterday as well. I did see some earlier. Campaign managers the programme is a hugely expensive undertaking, but the simple fact is where we have them, we do better than where we don't. So do please engage with it, ladies and gentlemen, and show some conservative spirit, and we can help ourselves. That's it from me, so please enjoy your event and make sure your questions are spot on as well. Thank you.
The last time I was on stage in Cheltenham, I was hosting a night with Anne Widdecombe. Yes, the mind boggles, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight, I'm going to host 3 Minutes with the chairman of the Conservative Party, Brandon Lewis.
Good evening. Thank you, Ian. It's fantastic to see so many here tonight, and I've just got a couple of things I wanted to say to you. Firstly, I want to give a huge thank you to my colleagues in the 1922 committee. Geoffrey Clifton Brown, one of the committee executive, is actually with us this evening because the 1922 oversaw a phenomenally professional and efficient and an effective process in Parliament, which has then handed over to us two great candidates. Two candidates who have been going, as Andrew rightly said, all around the country to all 4 nations and to all regions to make sure that we in the voluntary party have a chance to see our next leader, to hear from our next leader, and to quiz our next leader. And that is a hugely important task. As Andrew rightly said as well, our next leader is also going to be the next Prime Minister of this country. So it is important we have the chance to hear what they've got to say. And what's been brilliant to hear over the last few weeks is both our candidates outlining exactly why it is we are and should be, I hope you like me are, proud to be Conservatives, because we're hearing a positive vision, a determination about the future of our country, showing people all over our country that it's the Conservatives who have got the ideas, the enthusiasm and that determination to deliver for people everywhere in the future. And you've got a chance to quiz that tonight. So when it does come to those questions from the audience, please do give some thought to your question. And I have to say, you get a chance to do what we've seen time and again over these hustings, which is a proof that our party is the greatest party there is and the right party to lead our country because of the quality of our party and our membership. And that's a huge thank you from all of us to all of you for being part of that family. And to make sure we stay as a party moving forward and winning in government, we have to ensure we're winning more and more parliamentary seats. And as Andrew said, on the chairs, you've got those notes about the Campaign Manager Fund. We've oversold tonight, so if you're up in the seats upstairs, don't worry, you can get these Campaign Manager Fund details as you leave. Do give some thought to supporting that fund. We want to make sure we get a campaign manager here in Cheltenham for Alex Chalk to ensure that we keep this seat and stop the Lib Dems any chance of winning, and that we regain Stroud and continue to develop and win seats around the country. We can only do that with a really strong professional campaigning machine, and you can play a part in that. Every pound you pledge adds up towards another campaign manager. So please do give that some thought. But most of all tonight, enjoy the evening, enjoy the questions, enjoy our two brilliant candidates. Thank you.
Well, it's nearly showtime. Let's watch a short campaign video from Jeremy Hunt's campaign team.
The most striking quality about Jeremy Hunt was his unwavering commitment to get results. I think perhaps part of that is to do with his background in business. No matter what the obstacles were, he was prepared to push through them. He wanted to get results.
I've seen him deliver on the things that matter most to the British people. He has credibility from all sides. I trust him on Brexit.
I've known Jeremy for 40 years. And about 25 of those years we've worked together, setting up various businesses. Those early days were absolutely about his determination and grit. He would never give up.
When I first met Jeremy, I realised he was a man who actually was committed to making a difference.
In 2008, I lost my baby son Joshua as a consequence of serious failures in his care during my campaign to kind of uncover the truth about what happened. I was struggling to be heard, and Jeremy really listened and treated me as a grieving dad rather than a troublemaker. I knew that this was somebody who was going to change things.
My mum died quite tragically in poor care in Mid-Souths. Jeremy was incredibly kind. He saw the bereaved daughter behind the campaigner, and he saw it was people that mattered.
I have known Jeremy Hunt since the early 2000s. He and his business partner started funding the education of children living with HIV in our community-based programme. Jeremy's generosity was sensed by us all.
That desire to make a difference really drives him. That's never been about him. It's always been about what he can do to help others.
The work he's done will save the lives of countless babies, and other families will not have to go through the kind of pain that we did.
People often underestimate Jeremy because he comes across as being such a polite and generous and nice person, and he is. But I remember hearing him warning the EU not to mistake British politeness for British weakness, and I thought that just about sums him up.
I was pessimistic about the London Olympics. I thought, we could mess this up. I remember talking to Jeremy in the build-up. He said, no, we're a great country. We can do this if we have the right mindset. The delivery was outstanding, but also had this element of fun. I know that Jeremy was very involved in getting that balance right.
He believes in Britain as a force for good in the world. He's shown strong values at the FCO and consistently good judgment.
Negotiating, toughing it out when things get really difficult, keeping going, having a vision. Those are the skills that we need in a Prime Minister.
He's a unifier. He's somebody who can reach out to different groups of people.
My dad always taught me that politics should be about making a difference in ordinary people's lives. And Jeremy made a huge difference to our lives. He gave us hope, and that for me was the main thing, that he gave us hope in some very, very dark days.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Jeremy Hunt.
Hi, Ian. Thank you. Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's great to be in Cheltenham, a city of culture, a city of sport, a city of education, and a city of spies. Have we got anyone from GCHQ here? You'll be fired if you put your hands up, by the way. But, I'm Foreign Secretary. I'm responsible for GCHQ, and they are celebrating 100 years of keeping our country safe. So let's just give them a round of applause from the Conservative Party. Now, I'm looking around, and I can see the odd back Boris sticker and the odd has to be Hunt sticker. And I remember Bruce Forsyth once said, remember, only half the audience are ever going to like you. Don't worry about the other half, the bastards. But that's not going to be the Conservative Party, because we're going to come together after all this. We're going to be united, aren't we? And defeat Jeremy Corbyn and deliver Brexit. So I'm here to tell you what I want to change in our wonderful country as Prime Minister. And to govern is to choose, and I've got 4 priorities, and I'm going to tell you all of them. But we can't do any of those until we deliver Brexit. And when it comes to Brexit, the real issue is what is the quickest way to deliver Brexit? Who is the person who can get us out of the EU the most quickly? And when it comes to no deal, there isn't a huge difference between me and Boris. We both said that we'd prefer a deal. We're both willing to leave by the 31st of October if there isn't a deal.
We both have the risk of Parliament blocking no deal, which is why I have been cautious about making a hard commitment on that date, because I don't think Prime Ministers should ever promise unless they know they can deliver it. But getting out quickly, the quickest and safest way is to send to Brussels someone who can negotiate a deal that will get through Parliament. And that is what I'm going to do. Now, there's something about me that you may not have heard. I am the first Prime Minister to have run the NHS. You didn't know I was going to say that, did you? I'm actually the first Prime Minister who will have been an entrepreneur. And what we as entrepreneurs do is we negotiate. Now, I've asked this at every Hustings, just put up your hand if you've run your own business. Just look around for a moment. Would you get that at a gathering of Labour Party members? Would you get it with the Lib Dems? This is the Conservative Party. We can be so proud that we are the party of doers, wealth creators, people who take risks and create jobs for other people. And we negotiate. We negotiate with suppliers, with customers, for our leases on our properties. That's what we do. And that's what I'm going to do. And when I've done that and got us that deal that's going to get through Parliament, then we have the excitement of the amazing things we can do for our country. And my first priority as an entrepreneur is to fire up our economy. I want us to be the most pro-business, pro-enterprise, greenest, most high-tech economy in Europe. You know, we have the best universities in our country. We have more tech entrepreneurs. And our opportunity is to be the world's next Silicon Valley. And why does that matter? Because in 10 years' time, we're not going to be talking about Brexit, I hope. We are going to be talking about driverless cars, drones, artificial intelligence. And if we became the next Silicon Valley, we, the Conservatives, will be setting up our country for the 21st century. And we'd be parking an economic jumbo jet on Europe's doorstep, so that in those trade negotiations, they need us every bit as much as we need them, and that's what we're going to do. Number two, I'm the Foreign Secretary who's going to make our country walk tall in the world. And hasn't our Royal Navy done fantastically in the Gulf this week, protecting British shipping? And I've said I'll put more money into defence, and I'll do it because the threats are growing, but I'll do it for another reason. At the point of Brexit, I want the world to see that Britain, that special country that has always done more than nearly any other country to stand up for democratic values and the security necessary to underpin those values. I want the world to know that Britain is strong, Britain is confident, and we will always stand by the values that we believe in. Number three, we're nearly there. We as Conservatives are brilliant on the economics. People know we create jobs, but they need to know about our values as well. We've got to have a social mission. And I was proud to be responsible for the NHS. But I want our social mission to be education. You know, in our country, to our shame, still in the 21st century, a quarter of primary school leavers aren't able to read properly. And we are the party of opportunity. I want us to be the Conservative government that changes that abolishes the scourge of illiteracy, so that every single young person leaves their education, whatever their background, with a ladder in front of them. The first rung on that ladder has to be to learn to read. How high they climb after that, that's up to them. But the party of opportunity is going to create opportunities for every single person, set our young people up for the future, and that's the third thing that I want to do. And then the last one. This is actually a political one. I promise you that as your leader, I won't take us into a general election until we have got more young people to support our party. We can't be the party of aspiration if the most aspirational people in our country aren't supporting us. And I've got a whole bunch of policies, maybe we can talk about them, to attract young people. But there's another reason. Attracting young people was why Jeremy Corbyn did so well at the last election. And we must recognise the real and present danger to our country is a Labour Party that has become the most ruthless, dangerous, anti-Western, anti-British, anti-Semitic, hard-left cabal that we have ever seen in British politics. And our job is to stop him. We're going to get more young people on board so that we can do that. And you know, if we forget that, if we get this wrong, there will be no Conservative government, no Brexit, maybe even no Conservative Party. Get it right, and we will deliver Brexit, unite our party, unleash the potential of our extraordinary country, and send Corbyn packing, and that's what I'm going to do. Thank you very much.
Now, in these hustings, I normally spend 10 or 15 minutes interviewing both of the candidates, but I suspect after the grilling by Andrew Neil, you've probably had enough of that.
Well, you know, I enjoyed it, but anyway, whatever you want to do.
I'm going to ask 3 questions, then devote the rest of the time to audience questions, so do start thinking up these difficult questions. In a no-deal scenario, there is £39 billion available that we might not have to pay the EU. What proportion of that would we have to pay the EU, even in a no-deal situation?
Well, my understanding is that around half of that are debts that we agree that we owe legally. And, you know, I'm a businessman who paid my debts, and we're a country that honours our debts, and we would do that under my prime ministership. But another chunk of that 39 billion is to do with the transition period, which would obviously not happen in a no-deal situation. So from that point of view, there would be less money available to the EU, and there would be more money available to support our farmers, our fishing community, and other people who might be suffering as a result of any changes in tariffs.
So the half that we wouldn't have to pay, you would actually have to devote to effectively subsidising industries that found themselves in a very difficult position.
Well, I wouldn't use the word subsidy because, you know, there is going to be a change. If you're a farmer and you suddenly have a 40% tariff on your lamb exports and you export 80–90% of your lamb to the European Union, that is a very dramatic change. And you can't subsidise that farmer forever. In fact, you're not allowed to under WTO rules. So what you want to do is give them help to change their business model so that they can invest in products that they can sell on the domestic market or products that they could sell outside the European Union.
I've read a transcript of the interview that you've done with Andrew Neil, which is going out at the moment. And I think what a lot of people are going to concentrate on is the fact that you couldn't actually guarantee that we would be out of the EU by Christmas. That's the clip that is on social media at the moment. Do you want to clarify your remarks on that? Because Boris Johnson has been absolutely clear, we will be out by the 31st of October.
Let me say exactly what I said. No Prime Minister, no person who wants to be Prime Minister should make promises unless they know they can keep them. Now, in March, Parliament took no deal off the table. They made it legally impossible. And at the moment, there are people in Parliament trying to do exactly the same thing. And you know, there was an incredible sense of betrayal in our country when, having promised people for 2 years that we were going to leave at the end of March, we then failed to do so. So I fully accept, maybe I'll pay a political price for being honest with people, but the reality is that we face a hung Parliament with people, not just in the Labour Party, but people in our own party, absolutely determined to stop us leaving without a deal. Now, as it happens, I am prepared to leave without a deal, because I'm a Democrat and we have to respect the referendum result. But I am also going to be honest with people that we face those hurdles, and that's why I was not prepared, and I have not been prepared throughout this campaign, to make a promise that I believe no one is able to guarantee that they can make.
But there is a bit of a conflict though, isn't there? Because you are giving a date, the 30th of September, where you say, well, if we feel we can't get a deal by then we will definitely leave on the 31st of October. Why can't you give a date after that? Because there is a logic to your position saying that, well, if we're near a deal by the 31st of October, if it takes a few more days, a couple of extra weeks, that's fine. But you've got to quantify that. In the Andrew Neil interview, you didn't. You let people think that you would go to Christmas and beyond. And that's exactly the same kind of can-kicking that Theresa May has done.
No, I didn't. I actually said, if you look at the interview, in fact, it's just finished broadcasting, so you'll be able to enjoy it when you get home, folks. But what I actually said is the quickest way to leave the European Union is to choose someone who can negotiate a deal that can get through Parliament. I'm that person. I've also said that this has got to be a quick process. So we're going to put together this deal that can get through Parliament. I'll have the DUP with me, the ERG, the Scottish and Welsh Conservatives. We'll all come together. We'll find a deal that can get through Parliament, because those groups between them speak for a majority in Parliament. And then we'll discuss it with the EU in September. And if the EU aren't prepared to engage, and I think we'll know pretty quickly, then at the end of September I will say, okay, the talks stop, batten down the hatches for no deal, and I'll be preparing for that. But I can't tell you, Boris can't tell you, no one can tell you what Parliament will do in that situation. And that is why the only honest thing to do is to be clear that we face those risks. And as Prime Minister, I'm someone who will only make promises that I know I can deliver. I think that's absolutely fundamental to trust in British politics.
But you've gone... But you've gone from talking about a matter of days or possibly a couple of weeks after October the 31st to talking about Christmas.
No, Andrew Neil asked me about all these dates. I've always said, if we had a deal that was agreed and we nearly got it through Parliament and it needed a few more days at the end of that period, then of course I would give it, because it's better for us to leave without a deal.
Well, how many days?
How can you answer that question, Ian? You know that perfectly well. We don't know what the parliamentary process
you could
will
be saying 30, 60, 90. I think everybody here would like to have an indication from you as to whether you're thinking a few days, a month, 2 months, 5 months.
Well, if you have a deal that is agreed in September and then it needs to get through Parliament, we know that this is a matter of days and weeks. We can sit nights, we can sit weekends, we can do it as quickly as we possibly can, and that is a short period of time. But the reason why I have not been prepared to make that guarantee is because I don't think anyone can make that guarantee in all honesty, because we don't know what Parliament is going to do. And I think we have to think as a party about our relationship of trust, not just with the whole British people, but with the 52% who voted for Brexit. We don't have a majority in Parliament. This is something that is, therefore more challenging to achieve, and I want to be honest with people about that as Prime Minister. It's not about whether you're optimistic or not. I am extremely optimistic. It is whether this is the confidence based on a plan which is accurate and truthful about what we're actually able to do and how we're going to get there.
Final question from me. Jack Straw has just written a book called The English Job about the relations between Britain and Iran and why Iran distrusts Britain so much. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think the reason that Iran distrusts us is because we're America's #1 ally, and they have always seen us as a little Satan compared to great Satan. And this goes right the way back to the overthrow of the Shah and our historic friendship with the Shah when he was in power. So that's the historic reason. But now our role is different. We are one of the very few countries that has extraordinary connections, thanks to the Foreign Office, across the Middle East. and we want to try and find a way of allowing Iran to coexist peacefully with its neighbours. And our judgment as a country, alongside the previous American administration, was that the biggest danger to stability in the Middle East was if Iran got nuclear weapons. And 4 years ago, they were 18 months away from getting nuclear weapons. We signed that nuclear deal, and I still believe that was the right thing to do, because I think the Middle East would be a whole lot more dangerous if they had gone ahead and got those nuclear weapons. President Trump takes a different view on that. We agree with him on most things, but this is one where we don't.
I've just thought of a final question. We need a new ambassador to the United States.
Are you offering it?
No, I'm not sure I'd be very diplomatic, but how about a certain Boris Johnson?
I think, let me say this, when I'm successful, and by the way, this race is a lot closer than people are giving it credit for, I want Boris to have a major role in my government because of what I said in my comments earlier. We've got to come together after this leadership contest, which I think has done our party great credit in the way it's been conducted, but we have to come together. So whether it's that role or another role.
Oh, so you're not ruling that out then?
We'll see, we'll see. That'd be something to talk to Boris about.
Wouldn't it? Can I be a fly on the wall? No. Right, let's go to your questions. I've got a couple of ones that you've submitted in advance, and then we'll go to spontaneous questions. Nicola Bell, where is Nicola? Over there somewhere. And after Nicola, we'll go to Edward Hazan. Nicola.
Good evening.
Hello, Nicola.
Are you going to allow the prosecution of our armed forces for doing their job to go ahead?
I think it is totally wrong, Nicola, that we are dragging people who have served their country, showing great courage, through the courts nearly 40 years after Bloody Sunday. My dad was in the Navy. My dad was in the Navy, and he was actually responsible for Northern Ireland as part of his brief in one of his last jobs in the Navy. And he wasn't on the front line in the way that soldiers and the RUC were on the front line. But I know what it's like to worry about a family member having to confront the evil of terrorism. So what we need to do is to find a way to solve this that does not cause any risk to the Belfast Good Friday Agreement, which is one of the huge achievements of our country that, thanks to the painstaking work by John Major and also, dare I say it in this audience, Tony Blair, but it was a huge achievement for our country to get that peace process underway. We want to make sure we protect that, but we also have to have justice for people who serve their country, and there can be no equivalence between what they did and what the terrorists did.
Edward Hazan, followed by Mark Googe. Edward, somewhere over here, I believe.
Hello, good evening.
Just put your hand. Edward,
where are you?
Up here.
Oh,
sorry.
up there.
Edward, hello.
In the cheap seats.
The eminent Conservative philosopher Sir Roger Scruton was fired from his position as chair of the Building Better, Building Beautiful Commission after his views were deliberately misrepresented on Twitter. What should the Conservatives do to remedy this injustice?
I think we should reinstate him. I don't agree with Roger on everything he says, but I do like what he says about having more beautiful public spaces and public buildings. But his interview with the New Statesman was misrepresented. In the summary that the New Statesman did about that interview on Twitter, the editor of the New Statesman, to his credit, has acknowledged that and accepted that that was the wrong thing to do. And now we know that. I think we should be fair to Sir Roger and give him his job back.
If you'd like to hear an hour-long interview with Roger Scruton, I'm interviewing him on Tuesday at 8 o'clock on LBC. Edward Hazan next. Sorry, no, that was Edward. Mark Googe next. There.
Low wages, poor infrastructure, and lack of social mobility are more of an issue in the countryside than they are in the major cities. Never mind the Midlands engine and the Northern powerhouse. What will you do to reinvigorate England's rural and market town heartland?
Well, very important question. And let me get to the heart of why this matters for our party. If we remain the party that is primarily seen as the party of London and the South East, which is the most prosperous region in the whole of Europe, we won't win general elections. And the reason that we are in power now is because people like great local MPs like Alex Chalk won cities like Cheltenham against the Lib Dems, and we won a whole swathe of seats across the southwest. We won marginals in the Midlands and the north against Labour, and we have to be the party of the whole country, and the rural community matters to that. And I think one of the most important things we can do is sort out rural broadband and rural phone connections, because of course that is the way you stop the depopulation of villages. People can set up their own businesses from their living rooms. They can do it without having to move to cities and towns, and it is the lifeblood of villages and small market towns if we can start to do that. One more thing we can do is look at business rates. I, as part of my business tax cuts, I want to cut corporation tax to 12.5% Irish levels. That would be the most radical tax cut in our history. I also want to take 90% of high street shops out of business rates. And why is that? It's because they are suffering from the internet revolution, less footfall on the high street than we've had before. I want to give them the chance, a breather, so that they can adjust their business models to the new environment, and I think business rates is the best way we can help them.
Bernard Cook is next. Where are you, Bernard? That. And then the final question that's been pre-submitted from James Lister.
Thank you. Other than throwing laptops at would-be migrants, how can anybody using technology stop anyone walking across an Irish border that's still open?
Okay, very important question. This is one actually, incidentally, that Boris and I have the same view as to what the solution is, and it's about how we find an alternative to the backstop for the Irish border. And where there is agreement across the Conservative Party on all wings of the debate about Brexit is that we cannot have a return to a hard border on the island of Ireland. What we cannot accept and Parliament won't accept is the backstop arrangement, which means that we have to stay with EU customs tariffs until such time as the EU decides that we don't need to do that. And I believe that there is a technology solution, but it's not just technology, it's things like using a trusted trader scheme, mobile checks for food products. If you look at exports between France and Switzerland, as I understand it, they only stop about 1 in 50 trucks going over the border because the checks are done in the factories in France or the factories in Switzerland. So that's the way that you avoid having to have checks and infrastructure on the border. That is the solution to the Irish problem. Of course, the EU didn't want to offer us that before because they'd much rather we stayed inside the customs union. They must know now that's not going to go through Parliament, and that's why I think if we have a reasonable discussion with them, we can get a better solution, which is to allow us to have our own trade policy, which is what we campaigned on at the last election.
James Lister.
Good evening, Mr. Hunt.
Hello, James.
As somebody who is beginning to learn to drive, the cost of fuel seems to be far too expensive. The duty on the fuel is currently 57.95 pence a litre. In the event that you become Prime Minister, will you commit to reducing this tax?
Well, James, I would love to commit to reducing all sorts of taxes. The tax that I've chosen to prioritise is not perhaps your first choice, but I've chosen to make the most radical cuts in business taxes that we've ever had in our history. And the reason I've done that is because we Conservatives know that the only way you can spend money on our precious public services like the NHS or the education system, or give tax cuts like the one you would like on fuel, is by growing the size of the economy. And if we do what President Trump did, I don't agree with President Trump on everything, as you'll have seen this week, but if we do what he did in terms of business tax cuts, he fired up the American economy. They're growing now at twice the rate we are, more than 3%. We're growing at 1.5%. If we got to that level of growth, we'd have an extra £20 billion to spend either on public services or on helping people contain the cost of living. So that's why I think the first thing we should do as Conservatives is look at what we can do that only Conservatives know how to do, which is turbocharge our economy.
But if you want to help the rural economy, I mean, in areas like this and many others around the country, a car is not a luxury, it's a necessity. And it's a lifeline for many people. That would be something that would show that you were serious about helping rural areas.
Well, all those things we can do to help rural areas when we get our economy motoring. And I'm the person who's going to get our economy motoring in.
Right, spontaneous questions. Spontaneously put your hands up in the air if you have a spontaneous question. Gentleman in the front row here, then we'll go to the lady in the front row there, and I will go back on the rows in a moment. Say your name as well.
I'm Tom Aditya from South Gloucestershire. I have a question because as Conservatives, 3 of the MPs from South Glos are Conservatives, but South Glos district is one of the lowest funded for school funding. What you can do to help South Gloucestershire? That's the first question.
Thank you, Tom. Very important question. Within my plans, which are actually, they sit within Philip Hammond's rules about reducing the deficit and also reducing debt as a proportion of GDP, is extra money for education, and in particular reversing the per pupil funding cuts that we've seen recently, and I think that will be particularly relevant for areas like South Gloucestershire. The way I do it is the way I did it with the NHS. I wouldn't just say, here's the money, off you go. I'd say, can I have a 10-year reform plan from the education world? Because I want to not just abolish illiteracy, which we talked about before, but I want us to make sure that every single young person, but particularly the ones who don't go to university, leave with a rigorous technical qualification, as they would in Germany or Switzerland, that means that they can get a decently paid job. And that is a big change, not just in our schools when it comes to literacy and numeracy, but also in our FE colleges and our technical colleges, where we need to make sure that the qualifications people get are properly rigorous. And I want to know that we had a plan to do that. I think it's been long overdue to make those changes. I think every government has talked about that. And I would say money on the table, but can we have something for something so that we really can boast that we have the best education system in Europe?
Right, lady there, followed by gentleman second row from the back, 4 in. Yeah, you looking round, yeah.
Penny Hyams.
Sorry, Penny, where are you?
Front row there.
Penny, hello.
Thank you, Jeremy. You talked about cutting corporation tax, which is essential, brilliant. You talked about holding back for helping the high street shops, also so necessary. There's one more thing you have to do, surely. You have to tax Amazon, all those people who don't pay tax and are destroying our high streets.
Thank you, Penny. Yes, everyone has to pay their fair tax. And you know, if Amazon and Google and Facebook are using clever accounting techniques to declare their profits in other countries, even though actually they're making their sales here, then we have to respond to that by taxing sales rather than profits. I wish we didn't have to do that, but if that's the way that they want to play this, then you know, this has to be fair.
Why haven't you done that already?
We are. That's what Philip Hammond is proposed in the last budget.
Well, you're not taxing sales.
Yes, that's his plan.
But it hasn't come in yet?
No, he's announced it.
Okay. When's it coming in?
You'll have to ask Philip, but he's announced it in the budget.
Well, he might not be in the job for too much longer. Right, gentleman there, have we got a microphone? No, it was the gentleman in the second row from the back, sorry. Can you pass the microphone back? And then someone in that group there, have we got some over there?
Andrew Miller, County Councillor. My question is, how are you going to achieve net zero by 2050?
Thank you, Andrew. And first of all, we talked about attracting the votes of young people, and climate change is an absolute litmus test for young people as to whether we as a Conservative Party share their values. So they look at people like me, 52 years old, they say, you might not be around in 50, 60 years' time, we are going to be, and we want to know that you as Conservatives are going to conserve our planet, and we want to know that the ice caps are going to be there and so on. And so it's very, very important for us as a party we do that. Let me give you a practical idea, and I think this just shows why we're a little bit different to the way the left talk about all these issues. First of all, our approach to climate change has to be a pro-growth approach. The way you deal with climate change is not by making people poorer, it is by making the economy richer so that you can invest in things like clean technologies. Now I'm probably going to lose a lot of votes here, but we are, I'm afraid, going to have to dig up our roads again to have fibre optic cable going to everyone's front door so that we have a 1 gigabit connection. That is just the way the world is going. So my proposal is, when you do that in a city like Cheltenham, at the same time, why don't we put in electric car charging points so that we can move to electric car only towns and cities? Great for emissions, but also great for mums and dads taking their kids to school who worry about the fumes, and also great for noise levels in our cities. So that's one of the ways. I want to have pollution-free cities in 10 years.
Right, the gentleman over there, do we have a question upstairs? Oh, right at the end there, in the second row at the top. Right, sir.
Hello, Nick. Sorry. Hello, Jeremy.
He's over there.
Over here.
Hello.
Can you actually stand up when you ask your questions, so we can see where you are?
Hello, everybody.
Do you want to be leader of the Conservative Party?
Don't milk it, mate.
Firstly, thank you for coming this evening to Cheltenham. It's very much appreciated. Do you believe, obviously, with us leaving the EU, whether it's with a deal which I don't believe we're going to achieve, or a hard Brexit, which I think is basically on the table, our relationship with America, the United States, is going to be as vital as it ever has been. I myself believe the way Boris answered the question for Sir Kim with regards to the uncertainty of his future was the right way to address it. Not only because it sort of shows relationships with, it sort of safeguards relationships with Mr. Trump and doesn't sort of put him in a bad way. It keeps a relationship with America, and it doesn't give the answer that, no, we're not standing with you, America, and we're not standing with you, Britain. It's just, I think that's one of those questions that couldn't have been answered, and I think the way he did it was the best way. Would you not agree?
Well, you're going to have the chance to listen to Boris in about 10 minutes' time, so he can speak for himself. But let me tell you my feeling. President Trump said something which I profoundly agree with when he came to Britain for the D-Day commemorations. He said that the relationship between the United Kingdom and the United States is the most important in history. And when you look not just at the victory over the Nazis in the Second World War, but the peace that we've had since then, the fact that we haven't had any major world wars, it's been Britain and America that have been the countries that have made that possible. That alliance is so important, not just to our two countries, but actually to the whole world. And that's why I have always prioritized that relationship. But a relationship between allies needs to be a relationship of respect. And that will mean sometimes that we tell each other when we disagree. And I'm afraid this week I didn't agree with President Trump criticizing Theresa May just 2 weeks before she steps down as Prime Minister. I didn't think that was respectful, and I think amongst friends sometimes you have to say that if you're going to keep the relationship as healthy as it needs to be. And I'm someone who's prepared to make those difficult decisions.
Right, gentleman there, then I think, it's very dark up there, but I think it's a lady about 3 rows down. I hope anyway. Still got your hand up? Yeah, you.
Hi there. My name's George Hopkins, and I'm
George, sorry, where are you?
He's up there.
Up here.
George, hello.
I'm currently struggling to get onto the housing market as a young person. I was wondering, how will you help a young person like me get onto the housing ladder as the price of renting and house prices themselves rise, meaning I'm struggling to save for a deposit, and the likes of Help to Buy are possibly being phased out and be reduced, well, a while ago?
George, this is so important because many people in this hall will have bought a house in their 20s, and they will have found the value of that property has increased a lot, but that in the process has made it much harder for young people who want to do exactly the same thing. Margaret Thatcher had a policy called Right to Buy that helped 1.5 million council house tenants get on the housing ladder, and in the process she made many of them conservatives, because when they had a stake in our system, a stake in our society, then they began to realise that it's the Conservative Party that is the best bet. The risk we have if we don't solve that problem is that we lose young people. So she had her plan, Right to Buy, 1.5 million council house tenants. I've got a plan called Right to Own, which will help 1.5 million young people who can't afford a deposit or a mortgage, help them get onto the housing ladder. And it's based on the principle of gifting them land with planning permission, so that all they have to finance is the cost of actually building the house, which is much more affordable. Generally, it's the land that's the most expensive thing. And I've published details of that plan. That, I think, will be something that gives hope to a lot of young people like yourself.
Just as a quick follow-up to that, do you think there is a case for taking housing out of the DCLG and actually making it a cabinet appointment on its own? Because it is going to be one of the biggest challenges facing your government if you win.
I actually think the thing that matters is the Secretary of State at DCLG. I mean, Sajid Javid did that job fantastically well, and he really did champion the needs of people like George as a cabinet minister. So I don't think it's about being its own department, but it is about choosing the right person to champion it.
Right. Hopefully the lady that I picked out there. Yes.
Hi.
And then, just 1 second, and then the gentleman here.
Hi, I'm Alana and I'm 16, and I'm a bit worried about the cost of university. So if you're trying to get more support from young people, how are you going to make university more affordable?
Thank you, Alana. Great question. Give her a round of applause. I think William Hague made a speech about your age at a famous Conservative Party event, so maybe we'll hear more from you. I am a very big supporter of our tuition fee reforms because they have given us the best and the best funded universities in Europe. We've got 3, by some counts, 4 of the world's top 10 universities in our country. Other European countries haven't got any in the world's top 20. And this is a great thing for people like Ilana to know that we have these fantastic universities in our country. But I cannot justify to you, Ilana, or to anyone when I knock on doorsteps, 6% interest rates on those tuition fees. And so I commit to reducing those levels to the level of inflation. The thing that is most bonkers about the system we have at the moment is that because we have these high interest rates, the debt spirals up. Even when you're at university, it's going up by 6% a year when you're not able to work. And then we only get half of it repaid. And that must suggest that something is wrong in the system that we have at the moment. So I do want to sort that out.
Right. Can we have the microphone down here, please? And then lady here. you got the microphone?
Yep. Am I in line? Can you hear that?
I can hear
okay,
it. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr.
Can you
Hunt.
stand up, please?
Yep, Richard Collins from
Oh, it wasn't
West
actually. It
Oxfordshire.
wasn't actually you I called. It was a gentleman. It was a gentleman in front of you. Sorry. I'll try and get back to you in a bit.
Sorry.
All right. All right.
Oh, I'm sorry. You can have it back in a minute.
You're very popular, so I will come back to you. I promise.
I'm sorry about that. My question was about leadership.
What's your name, sir?
Sorry, Peter.
Peter, hello.
Udell. My question was about leadership. Your plan seems to be you're either going to leave with a deal, you're going to somehow renegotiate with the EU, or you're going to try and leave without a deal. But in order to do that, you'd have to bring the rest of the Conservative Party MPs behind you. How do you think you're going to do that?
Well, Peter, leadership is about telling people what they need to hear, not just telling people what they want to hear. And this situation we're in at the moment is solvable, but it's not easy. And I'm not going to tell anyone that it's going to be an easy process. What I will say to Conservative MPs is that unless we come together, there will be no Brexit, because we need to not just have unity amongst Conservative MPs, but we need our friends in the DUP to be voting with us in Parliament. That is the only way that we can deliver Brexit. And in Parliament, they will try and stop a no-deal Brexit if we don't manage to get a deal.
But Dominic Grieve and Philip Hammond do not want Brexit.
They don't want Brexit.
So how do you get them on board?
Because both Dominic Grieve and Philip Hammond, and by the way, I think it is totally wrong for anyone to take no deal off the table, because they weaken our negotiating position. So what we need to do, the safest way, is to actually negotiate a deal, but we have to be prepared to leave without a deal. And I just want to make another point about leadership and about unity. You know, the great thing about our party, if you look back over the last 30 years, is that we have had a radical tradition, the Thatcherite tradition in our party, which has reminded us that great countries do bold things from time to time. And we've had a one nation tradition in our party that is reminding us, as David Cameron did, that elections are won from the centre ground and we need to be compassionate Conservatives. Put those two traditions together and it is absolute magic. Forget that and you let in Labour. And so that is why we've got to remember our genius as a party, which is that Conservatives united never can be defeated.
I'll come to you in a moment, madam, but I'm going to get booed if I don't go to this gentleman over here. I got booed in Birmingham, but I don't expect it in Cheltenham.
At last, I'm online to Mr. Hunt. Thank you. It's a similar point, actually, to my friend here, but I will pursue it, which is I think you and Boris need to get real and also get rough and tough. You've been a negotiator in business. Negotiators is about leverage, and the question here is how much leverage do we really have? The EU, as you have been saying, can see the parliamentary arithmetic. They've been listening to all these dialogues and hustings, no doubt, that have been going around. So there's no reason for them to say other than they've been saying, and if I was in their shoes, I'd say the same. You've got the deal. That's the deal that was negotiated. We're not budging, and that's the end of it. So what makes you think you can actually get the EU to budge and actually come up with a much better deal that actually will get through Parliament, and actually the DUP, who are principal in this, accept it?
Well, thank you for asking the question, and I think you're absolutely right to point out the challenges that we face. So why is it that I do believe that we can get a deal? It's because when I talk to European leaders, they say that if a new British Prime Minister comes up with a different plan, for example, for the Northern Irish border, of course they're going to listen to that because they would like to find a way through this as well. And I think that if we approach this, first of all, demonstrating that we can get a majority through Parliament, which is why I've said I would put the DUP on my negotiating team. But secondly, we approach it with the right tone. And in business, you know, you don't do a deal with someone you don't trust. So you have to be able to establish that relationship. Then I believe there is a deal to be done. But as you said, you have to be prepared to walk away, and I would be prepared to walk away, and I've always said that in the end, if the only way to leave the EU is without a deal, then I would be prepared to do that. But because of the parliamentary arithmetic, that is a high-risk way to count on leaving the EU, which is why our best bet is to find a deal that can get through Parliament and to choose as Prime Minister someone who has the highest chance of delivering that.
And so is it your contention that, I mean, obviously you think you are the best person to deliver that, but the reason that Boris Johnson can't is because they don't trust him?
I don't want to talk about Boris. You're about to hear from Boris, and you can ask him all these questions yourself. But look at my track record as Foreign Secretary. I have relationships with our important counterparts, countries like China, Iran, Washington, and I have relationships with all those countries, but I'm prepared to talk tough when it comes to, for example, talking about the rights of the people in Hong Kong. I'm prepared to deliver difficult messages, but I also keep the relationship, and that is the way you get a deal.
Okay. Right, final question to Jeremy Hunt from the lady down here.
Chris Wilson. I understand the College of Policing now would require all new recruits to have a degree. With your experience in the NHS and nursing, who also went through that process, what is your view?
Well, very good question, Chris. And it's the first time I've been asked that question. So I'll tell you, I don't think the NHS experience when they moved nursing to being degree only was entirely happy. My mum was a nurse. She didn't have a degree, and I think she was a great nurse. I mean, I would say that, wouldn't I? But I think that nursing is a vocation, and I do understand that the job requirements of a nurse these days are different to what they were 50 years ago, and you have to learn more about what doctors used to do to be a good nurse. And so I understand if we want to raise the bar, but what I would say is don't lose that sense of a vocation and find a route in, as I did as Health Secretary, for people who don't have that degree, who could be the most fantastic, compassionate, committed nurses through the apprenticeship route. And so if the police are thinking about the same thing, I would say the same to them. Don't close your doors to people who could be brilliant police officers, but might have a slightly different background.
That's it. Well done.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Thank you,
Jeremy Hunt. There is no interval act, so let's see Boris Johnson's campaign video.
Nice to see you. Hello, good morning.
Hello.
Yes, of course you can. If I get in, we'll come out deal or no deal on October the 31st. We'll do that.
Thank you very much.
Would that make you come back and vote Conservative again?
Yes.
That's the spirit.
Yes.
But we've got to have the courage to tell the people of this country that we can do it if we really want to. And that's the only way, actually.
And you're the only person that can do that.
A lot of teachers are telling me that they feel that the funding per pupil isn't high enough. We need more police out there, but sometimes I think we need. And stop and search?
Yes.
Totally with you.
I'm scared because my daughter used to live in London as well.
Yeah.
She was at university.
Safe big city it was when I used to run it. I can tell you we got crime down by 20%. We've got the murder rate down.
It's like Mr. Khan off, but it's not good.
But I also think we need to be supporting the wealth creators and the business sector, because otherwise you're not going to have the dosh to invest. Right. Cut some taxes and you'll get more money in. Would you normally think of yourself as a Conservative voter, would you say?
No.
No? Ever? Can I ask you a terrible question? Would you consider voting for me?
Yes.
If there is one lesson from that referendum of 2016, it is that too many people feel left behind, that they're not able to take part fully in the opportunities and success of our country. That's why now is the time to unite our society and unite our country, to build the infrastructure, to invest in education, to improve our environment, and to support our fantastic NHS, to lift everyone in our country, and of course also to make sure that we support our wealth creators and the businesses that make that investment possible. Now is the time for us to believe in ourselves and what we can do. And that's why I am standing to be leader of the Conservative Party.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Boris Johnson.
Good evening. Thank you very much, Ian. Good evening again. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening. It's wonderful to be here. Wonderful to be here tonight in this historic racecourse as the horses come now into the final furlong. And I want to thank you all very much for watching. You could have been watching Federer, Nadal, and instead you've decided to watch the latest edition of Hunt, Johnson, and I'm delighted that you have, because it's a very, very important time for our party. And there are those, of course, who think that we're in a bad way and who are worried about the state of the opinion polls, and they point out that at the recent European Parliament elections we managed to register a staggering total of 8.8% of the popular vote, and they're therefore inclined to be cast down about our party. But I want you to know that the hour is darkest before the dawn. And we're going to turn this thing round, and we're going to come from behind, and we're going to win. And I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to do three things to restore the fortunes of our party, and they're very, very simple. The first one, and you know it is to make sure that above all we come out of the European Union on October the 31st. And we get Brexit done. And there are several key ingredients of the deal that we're going to do. Number one, we're going to make sure that we take the provisions on the European Union citizens who are here in this country, the protections that they deserve, and we're going to put those into law in a unilateral and supererogatory way. Isn't that the right thing to do? We should have done it ages ago. That's what we're going to do. Number two, we're going to take that 39 billion, rather a large sum, I think we're at the upper end of what the EU was expecting, and we're going to suspend it in a state of creative ambiguity over the talks until such time as we get the answer that we need. And then, of course, the third thing is to make sure that we deal with those issues of frictionless trade across the Northern Ireland border and indeed elsewhere, and we take those questions, which are eminently soluble, and we remit them for solution where they properly belong in the context of the negotiations on the free trade agreement that we are going to do after we have left the European Union on October the 31st. That is the right way forward. And in the meantime, we of course get ready to do what? To come out without an agreement, to come out with no deal if we must. And I don't want to end up there, but I think you'll agree it is sensible to prepare for that eventuality, isn't it? And I think it's totally wrong that for 3 years this country has been told that we can't get ready, that we're not up to it, when I think we can get ready. And we are up to it. And the Gloomadon poppers will tell you that the planes won't fly, and that there won't be clean drinking water in Gloucestershire. And I've even heard it said, I think it was the Department of DEFRA said, that there wouldn't be adequate supplies of glucose and milk solids and whey wherewith to make the Mars bars on which our children depend. And I have to say, whatever happens, we will get a great deal. We'll get a great deal. But whatever happens on November the 1st, I prophesy this with all confidence, my friends, there will be clean drinking water in Gloucestershire. The planes will fly, and we will have adequate supplies of Mars bars, because where there's a will, there's a way, ladies and gentlemen. As you are bracing yourselves for that punchline. And after we've come out of the EU, we'll be able to begin the work of relaunching our party and bringing our country together. And if there is one sentence that sums up what I want to do, it is to unite our country in the way that I was able over 2 terms to unite the city, to unite London. If you may remember that when I became Mayor of London about 11 years ago, we had 4 of the 6 poorest boroughs anywhere in the UK. After 2 terms, when I stepped down, we had none of the poorest 20. That's because we'd brought crime down, we'd invested massively in infrastructure, we'd boosted technology, and that is effectively what we need to do in our country today. We need to be raising up education funding around the country, don't we? I think the disparities have grown too big, and the per pupil funding should be increased around the country. It's an absolutely right thing to do with the funds that we have available. We should be investing in better policing, and I've proposed that there should be another 20,000 police on the beat, and we'll make sure that happens as well. We should also be investing much more in transport infrastructure of all kinds. And I want to be the Prime Minister who does, for instance, for Northern Powerhouse Rail, what I was able to do with Crossrail. I want to be the Prime Minister who does for connectivity in the West Midlands, what I was able to do with the tube upgrades, linking together those incredible centres of urban dynamism in the West Midlands, as Andy Street is already proposing. Thank you for that support from the younger generation. That is what we should be doing. We should be doing all kinds of things to improve, not just mass transit, not just public transport, but of course our roads as well, like the missing link roundabout, for instance, here or hereabouts, that needs to be improved. Now, if I make a final point about infrastructure, we should of course be improving our broadband connectivity. This is no longer a luxury. It is absolutely vital that people across the country have full fibre broadband. It is pathetic that in this country we have only 7% coverage. In Spain, they have 85% coverage. There are pueblos and Andalusia that have far better coverage, I'm afraid, than Cheltenham. We can do much, much better. Let's accelerate full fibre broadband. And if you ask how are we going to pay for it all, well, actually the cash is there, but above all, we are the party, we must never forget this, we are the party that understands, in fact, we're the only party that understands the vital connection between great public services and great infrastructure and great health service and great education and supporting the wealth-creating side of our economy and backing the entrepreneurs, backing the startups, backing business and industry, reducing the burdens on them, including the burdens of taxation upon business, so that they can grow and generate the revenue that we are always going to need to pay for great infrastructure and pay for the poorest and neediest. And of course, there is one gentleman or one group of people who don't understand that fundamental symmetry at the heart of modern conservatism, and that is Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour Party. And whatever we do, we must get ready to fight and defeat them, because they would be an absolute disaster, putting up taxes on inheritance, on pensions, on income, on corporation tax. They'd put a tax up on gardens, my friends. I revealed that to the people of Sevenoaks, and I told them they have to change their name to Three Oaks if Corbyn got his hand. We cannot let him anywhere near. We cannot let that Hamas-backing, Hezbollah-supporting apologist for the Kremlin anywhere near the government of this country. Can we? Absolutely not. And we're going to fight him off. And we're going to win. And we're simultaneously going to prick, by delivering Brexit, by uniting our country, we are thereby going to prick the twin puffballs of the Liberal Democrats and the Brexit Party that are sprouting saprophytically, feeding on the sense of decay, of trust in our politics, and that is how we will come back from behind, and we will win. I just remind you the last time I had to fight an emanation of the London Labour left, considerably wilier and more devious than Jeremy Corbyn. We beat him when our great party, the Conservative Party, was 17 points behind in London. We did it then, we're going to do it again. With your help, we will. Thank you very much indeed for listening. I hope I can count on your support. Thank you.
How was Andrew Neil?
Well, I congratulate all this audience for turning up to listen to this live tonight, and rather than watching either Federer, Nadal, or Andrew Neil. I don't know how it was. I missed it, of course. I mean, I've been here.
Well, you were in it.
Well, it was like any other Andrew Neil interview. It was a sort of rumbustious exchange, or my side of it was. I didn't see Jeremy's, but it seemed all right.
Now,
I think probably no blood drawn was my general view at the end of it.
The £39 billion that you want to leave in creative ambiguity,
yes.
How much of that are we legally obliged to hand over, even in a no-deal scenario?
Look, the 39 billion, lawyers will make all sorts of cases about different obligations that they think we have, but you remember that the House of Lords Committee found that there was no obligation upon us to pay anything. So I rather than getting into a negotiation with you now, Ian, because I'm sure they'll be watching in Brussels and they'll be thinking, how much can we actually count on? I think they should count on nothing, none. And I think, as I say, the entire sum should be suspended in a state of creative ambiguity over the talks until we get the result that we want.
So what do you say to your opponent who, sitting in that seat a moment ago, said that he thought we had to pay half of it and we had to meet our legal obligations?
Well, look, all I can say is I do not wish to play back any of the points made by anybody. You know, the whole point of this is to avoid needlessly criticising one's opponent, but I do think it is, generally speaking, a mistake in any negotiation, needlessly to weaken your own side in the talk, so undermine. So that is why.
So that's what he did half an hour ago in that seat.
So that is why I put such emphasis on the importance of getting ready for no deal, and that's why, even though people pester me a lot about this, I won't go quite so far as to rule out proroguing Parliament, even though I don't want to do it in a million years. If you see what I mean, it is very, very important as you go into a negotiation to be firm about what we intend to do. And I want to come out of the EU with a great deal on October the 31st this year, not October the 31st next year or the year after or whenever my opponent thinks is a good idea. You know, we need to get on with it.
You see, you just brought up proroguing Parliament. I didn't raise it.
I know, I knew you were going to raise it, though.
No, well, I actually wasn't. But you brought it up,
okay,
so
well,
that will lead people to think that actually that is getting
No.
higher up his agenda.
Well, then they mustn't think that. Then let's try and calm them down, because it's not getting higher up.
Okay.
It isn't. But the point I'm trying to make is, at this stage, you don't needlessly weaken your own negotiating position in any way.
If you had your time over again, would you answer that question about Sir Kim Darroch that was put to you by Julie Etchingham on Tuesday in a rather different manner?
Well, look, on Kim, I rang him day before yesterday to say how sorry I was that he had gone. I was very surprised that he resigned, because I think that he's been an exceptional public servant, and the point I was trying to make was that I think all our ambassadors, all our civil servants should be defended and protected from the leaking of their stuff into the public domain. I also felt it was a bit unfortunate that his career was being turned into a political football on a live TV debate about the Tory Party leadership, and so I wanted to steer off it if I possibly could. That was what I was trying to do. I don't think Kim, it turned out, hadn't actually watched the debate, but someone had told him about it. And
but your remarks did play a role in his decision, as he told you.
Well, if that is correct, then obviously.
Well, you admitted it was correct to Andrew Neil.
That's a great shame. But as I say, my understanding is that what happened was that Kim was told about the debate, and I think what may have happened is that he received a garbled account. What I was trying to do was to say that. I don't think that our civil servants should have their private advice to ministers leaked, and I think that people who do leak confidential advice to ministers should be hounded down and prosecuted. And that's my view. And I suppose in the TV debate I was slightly taken aback that the tenure of Kim was being turned into a political.
You must have expected that question.
No, I thought it was extraordinary, actually. It didn't seem to me to be right to start talking about the career of a diplomat on national TV. I just thought it was a bit odd.
But going back to my first question on this, do you, in retrospect, do you wish you'd answered that question slightly differently?
Well, I think it would have been better if the whole subject had never come up.
I know that, but that wasn't my question.
Well, no, because what I was trying to say. Well,
that's the first heckle we've had in the Hustings, isn't it?
Right. Yes. I don't think that anything I said. The honest truth is, I don't think that anything I said was material to. It was actually decisive in Kim's decision to resign. Had I my time again, which is to answer your question directly, yes, I probably should have been more emphatic that Kim personally had my full support. But I was surprised that his tenure as ambassador in Washington should be raised by the Foreign Secretary as a fitting subject for debate in a Conservative Party leadership campaign. And I thought since, and given that he then, having received the fulsome backing of the Foreign Secretary and having been assured that he was going to be kept in office for the rest of his term, it then seemed to be odd that he resigned, and I didn't understand that.
Okay. Obviously, a new ambassador has got to be appointed. What about Ambassador Jeremy Hunt?
Well, I'm not going to. That would be, taking this contest for granted, and I won't do that, and nor will I give any. I'm not going to discuss any potential appointment that I might make, because that would come under the general heading of measuring up the curtains.
He didn't rule you out for the job, by the way. Final question from me. Iran, obviously massive issue at the moment. Why do you think the Iranians distrust us so much?
Well, the Iranians it's very interesting. The Iranians are just about the only country in the world that still believes that Britain runs the world, and they think that we're behind just about everything, and that we manipulate America, which in turn manipulates Israel, and that's how they see it. That's the view of the taxi drivers in Tehran, and they've just had a long-standing view of that, view of the UK. Well, ever since I suppose the Mossadegh was deposed and all the rest of it. It's been a long history with Iran. But what I want to achieve with Iran, and I think what sensible people want to achieve, is a new relationship in which the people of Iran see us as potential economic partners and a country that they can do business with. And don't forget, there are many, many millions of young Iranians who think very differently from their leaders, who want to take part in the economy in a different way, and we should be reaching out to them, and not necessarily constrained by the very difficult relations we currently have with Tehran.
When you have meetings with Iranian representatives, ministers, or you phone them up as Foreign Secretary, I mean, how does that go? Is it incredibly awkward?
Well, no, because as you know, there are factions in Tehran, and so the Iranian Revolutionary Guard is a sort of state within a state, but then people like Rouhani or Javad Zarif, my former counterpart as foreign minister, really represent a different strain of opinion, and we have quite good relations with them, but clearly the shots are being called by the IRGC, and things are very tough with them.
But I mean, can you have a normal conversation with them? Can you have a laugh with them?
Yes. I mean, I wouldn't describe them as a laugh a minute, but we certainly can laugh with them.
Right. I'm going to put a question to you that Edward Hazan put to Jeremy Hunt. Sir Roger Scruton was fired from his position as chair of the Building Better, Building Beautiful Commission after his views were deliberately misrepresented on Twitter. What would you do about that?
Well, I think it was disgraceful, the Roger Scruton episode, and I think he should be, if he's willing to serve again, I don't know whether he is willing to serve again, but he should be restored.
Okay. Right, Richard Silvey. Where's Richard? Followed by Marion Griffiths. Where are you, Richard? Over there.
I'm Richard Silvey. I'm a retired veterinary surgeon and still farming. I would like to ask you, Boris, what are your views on the long-term unification of Ireland?
I'm against it. And I think if I keep my answers snappy, we can get through more. But I mean, that's. I think that it's, we've got a settlement. I think that our union is very precious. Let's stick with it.
Okay, Marion.
Good evening, Boris.
Where are you?
Here.
Oh, over there.
Good evening, Boris. My question is on the subject of pensions. 7 years ago, 3.8 million women were denied their state pension without being given sufficient notice to make alternative provision for their planned retirement. How would you plan to resolve this issue, please?
Well, thank you. And this is the famous case of the so-called WASPy women, and I have made several representations already on behalf of my own constituents who fall into this category. And I must say that the answer I've got back from the Treasury is not yet satisfactory. But I will undertake, if I'm lucky enough to succeed in this campaign, to return to this issue with fresh vigour and new eyes and see what I can do to sort it out, because I'm conscious it's been going on for too long.
But do you commit to sorting it out?
I commit to doing everything I possibly can to sorting it out. But you know, obviously, the Treasury the Treasury raised some stupefying sum that they say will be necessary to deal with it. I'm not convinced that that's necessarily true. Let's see what we can do.
But you would be First Lord of the Treasury.
Yes, and I'm not making any more spending commitments tonight. That's all.
Right, Daniel Charlton, followed by George Williams, then we'll go to spontaneous questions. Where is Daniel? Down there. And where's George? Is George here?
Gloucestershire has greatly benefited from the existence of numerous grammar schools. Will you commit to ending the ban on the creation of new grammar schools and show that we are the party of social mobility?
Well, thank you. As far as I know, there are provisions, aren't there, for the expansion of grammar schools?
Of existing ones.
Of existing grammar schools. Look, I'm in favour of academic selection. Let me put it that way. I think it's an incredibly powerful utensil of educational improvement. I'm not sure that going back to the era of grammar schools, the 11 plus everywhere, is going to be the right way forward. But I do think that academic selection is a powerful way of bringing up attainment across the board. And the places I've noticed, the places that have grammar schools, you not only have improved achievement in the grammar schools themselves, but also the neighbouring schools as well. So I'm a taker for it. I'm not certain that we want to sound though as though we're going back to the 1950s. We need a new way of projecting a policy of academic selection and competition.
Okay, George, I think, are you at the back there?
Hello. I live in a village. For most things, I have to travel to Cirencester. There is one bus a week. That's not particularly grand. What would you do to improve the connectivity of our villages to our towns for rural folk like me?
Well, thank you. And I do think that, and I've mentioned full fibre broadband, which I think is an important aspect of rural life. But you're talking about buses. And yes, we do need a better bus networks across the country. And I think that you've got to make sure that local government is properly helping bus networks to survive. And I think it's been one of the difficulties of the recent the cash settlements we've been forced to give local authorities, that they haven't often had the funding they think is necessary to help with local transport. I think buses are a much undersung resource, and I will I cannot pledge at this stage to put huge sums of public money into buses, but I will certainly do what we can to improve the network. But I'm conscious that this is a big issue across the country.
Right, over to you for questions. Let's have the lady, or is it a gentleman? No, I can't see which one of you has got your hand up. It's the lady here. And then a gentleman right at the back over there.
Isabella Moore, entrepreneur. I run a service that provides support to exporters. And you as Foreign Secretary and also a fluent French speaker, I'm
Well,
sure you're
are you?
aware,
I
I
know about
understand that you are, that you are aware of the benefits of having those foreign language skills. Yet the uptake in schools and at universities of language has been declining during the last 15 years. You can sell it, you can buy in English, but you can't sell. What would you do to reverse this situation?
Well, I think you're making a very, very good point. And actually, it's one of the paradoxes of EU membership, that the teaching and learning of French, German, other European languages has fallen dramatically in this country. And I remember campaigning vigorously when I was both as mayor and previously as a journalist for the teaching of those languages. What we should be doing as we come out of the EU is building new partnerships with France, with Germany, with all our European friends to strengthen the teaching of those languages with exchanges and everything else. Because it's very, very striking that by doing everything through Brussels, we've allowed the bilateral cultural relations often to atrophy. I mean, particularly with Germany. It's considering what a huge trading partner it is, it's staggering how little cultural language teaching exchanges there are.
Right, gentleman right at the back there, then the lady down here.
Martin King, Mid Worcestershire.
Yes.
My daughter lives in London and is approaching the age at which I, as a single man, bought my first house. What will you do to ensure that there is affordable access to housing for all people across the whole of the country and nobody has to run the risk of sofa surfing?
Well, thank you.